What is going on, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Time Killers Podcast. My name is Neil Rivera, and I am once again killing time with a man who has played and enjoyed 10 video games this year, Matthew Field.
How's it going?
Well, I'm really just excited to be here with you, Matthew, and talking about our top 10 games of 2025. We teased it in our last episode, and we're here. We've got our lists assembled. We've put in the hours, we've put in the time, and we're going to count them down for you. We want to set the stage before we sort of jump into the countdown. In terms of like format and how we're going to go about things. So we're going to do it round robin. We're going to alternate. Matthew, I'm going to spoil it. You're going to go first.
Okay.
And then, we're going to just alternate. If for at any point someone lists a game that the other has on their list, but maybe in a higher position, the person who has it higher will call it out, and we will save that conversation for when it comes up in the other's list. So for example, if Matthew has Clair Obscur Expedition 33 at number 7 and it's my game of the year, I will call it out at the time that he brings it up, and then we'll talk about it at the end when I talk about my game of the year. Let's see. I guess before we get into like the countdown proper, at the top of the show, we really just want to talk about like the methodology, like sort of reasoning behind these lists. Matthew, is there anything that sort of like, you kept in mind while putting your list together? Anything that you prioritized? Like what was your sort of process for putting your list together?
There were two sort of major things that I was thinking about as I was going through and trying to rank all the games that I played this year. The biggest one for me was the newness of the experience. I think it's easy to look at a game and talk and think about how much you enjoyed it or how much fun you were having with it. But I think looking at it from a different layer, a lot of what genre, what am I trying to say here? A specific genre of game doesn't. The games within that genre don't necessarily vary that far from each other. I'll go ahead and give an example here, which is like Ghost of Yōtei is not on my list, but it's a game that I enjoyed a lot, and but didn't make this list for reasons partially because of how similar it is to other open world games. So all that is to say is that I was trying to prioritize if there was any kind of question about which game I enjoyed more, in terms of ranking on the lists and which games made the list. I was prioritizing ones that had a new twist or something unique that is providing a different spin on either a genre or inventing a new genre of its own.
Nice. Yeah, no, I mean, it's good to sort of like set up your expectations that way, because like it makes for, what I would say like could be a potentially interesting list. But I'm excited to see sort of like how that translates. I mean, I guess my methodology is just sort of like, what are the games that resonated most with me, both on a personal level and just both from a technical, like, what it's doing gameplay wise and narrative, all the sort of facets of game development. So yeah, I mean, I didn't necessarily prioritize, like anything that was new or like sort of revolutionary or groundbreaking. Like I definitely think like there are some games on my list that didn't necessarily move the needle one way or the other, but did they executed at a really high level, and they were experiences that ultimately I spent a lot of time with this year just because of like the quality of it.
So I mean, I think not to say that like not every game on my list is fully a unique snowflake in its on a league of its own, as you'll see. But I just, when trying to determine which one I gave the edge to, that was kind of the thing I kept coming back to.
Interesting. Yeah, no, and I feel like my list, like there's sort of like these mini narratives within the list. I promise, guys, we're gonna get to the countdown here soon. But like these sort of like, I feel like as we go through my list, I will sort of explain those conversations in my head about like how I got there and how I got to that game over this game over that game. Even games that aren't even on my top 10 list, so to speak. So, all right, that's enough. We're not talking about how we came up with the list. We're here to talk about the list. Matthew, you're first. Top 10 games of 2025. What is your number 10?
My number 10 game of 2025 is Ball Pit.
Ooh, I am so excited to have this conversation.
Yes, because I know, we talked about this game not that long ago on the podcast, but I believe you have played a significant portion of this since we discussed that. So maybe we should actually talk about what you think about this game, since I've talked about, linked about it, and we'll do so again here. But what do you think about Ball Pit?
Yeah, no, I mean, I was a little skeptical going in because of the ball breaking sort of being the centerpiece of the experience, the roguelite experience. And I am sort of amazed and impressed at how cleverly just at how much they're able to sort of evolve around that with all of the different power-ups and the ways that you can fuse them and combine them. So I'm having a blast with it. It unfortunately didn't make my list because I think just like as a roguelike, there's some like annoying roguelike things that it doesn't do as well. And ultimately, like, I didn't come down as positively on the city building stuff in between. Like, it felt like, it was keeping me away from the actual combat. But I mean, I think overall, like, I think this is, I think it's totally deserving to be here. Like, I think the aesthetic is really dope. The soundtrack is really, really good. And I mean, yeah, like the actual core gameplay loop of, of going through and breaking the bricks of enemies with the different ball power-ups is really, really satisfying.
Yeah, I think, that's certainly a complaint that I've heard about this game, with the city building not being as engaging as the in-level, brick breaking elements. And also, some people have taken issue with the way that, a lot of the progression is tied to stat-based increases rather than more tangible, skill improvements or advances in strategy in terms of how you're fusing. It just hasn't. I mean, I get those are legitimate criticisms, but those just haven't been factors for me. I haven't minded. I've enjoyed the little bits of stat increases that I get when I, successfully complete a building in the town management portion in between runs. Mm-hmm. I like, cause I can still feel the how much more damage the baby balls are doing when I get back in a level. The stat increases have not been minute enough for me to not be able to notice them. So yeah, that just hasn't been an issue with me, and I've enjoyed constructing my city and moving it around to make optimal shots in between each run. So yeah, it's all come together to be a really compelling loop, and the rate at which they drop new levels and unlocking new items and balls has been steady. So it's my number 10 game of the year.
Yeah, no, it's been a game that I can imagine is one that is one that you chip away at over the course of a year. And so like I imagine that even though we're talking about this at the end of 2025, is that we're both probably going to be putting hours into this periodically over the next few months. And I definitely don't speak for you, but I definitely will. And yeah, it's a testament to that that progression, that slow and steady progression system.
Yes,
I think
there's certainly still stuff in the game that I have not done. I still there are still characters that I've unlocked, which are the characters are surprisingly diverse in terms of the play styles that they allow for. And there are still plenty of characters that I've barely touched, and haven't completed runs with. So yeah,
shout out to letting you do a partner, character as well. Like once I unlocked that, like it really felt like the game opened up. Like I forget if it's a building or if there's just like some sort of upgrade, but like it essentially lets you bring two characters into a run and it combines their powers.
Yes, yeah, and they just the game throughout the campaign kind of drops these subtle new twists on how you play and the options you're given in a way that is just, like I said, it constantly keeps it interesting and keeps you engaged from run to run.
A worthy number 10. Moving on to my number 10 game of the year. I made Matthew go first because he already knew it. It's Discounty. This is, I guess, another smaller indie title that we covered on this show previously. But for those of you who didn't listen to that episode, this is the cozy grocery store management simulator. So yeah, I mean, it's very for me, like the reason it's here, I think, is because it kind of scratches and sort of hits a lot of the same notes that Stardew Valley did for me. But I would argue that it has an even more addictive gameplay loop, mainly because of like the store management stuff. It's a lot more hands-on. You're managing the back room, and there's a lot more, like you're ordering stuff at the computer, like managing your inventory. So there's a lot of stuff that I think speaks specifically to me that even though I enjoy games like Stardew Valley and Harvest Moon, like they don't quite hit in the same way. And then on top of it, there's just this really like charming neighborhood that the game takes place in, and there's all these kind of kooky characters that all have their relationships with one another, and then you eventually develop relationships with them as the main character. So I think all of it's really, really, really well done. I mean, really the only thing like negatively that I come down on it with, and like sort of, like going back to that Stardew Valley comparison, is that like Stardew felt like a more complete product at launch, where you had the mines and you had like this really robust progression system. And while Discounty had some of that, and they sort of have hinted that some of that stuff is coming in future updates, it's not as like the 1.0 version isn't quite as robust as something, say, like you're not going to drop like hundreds of hours into this compared to something like a Stardew Valley,
right?
So that's the only reason. That's the only thing that really kind of kept it from being higher in my book. Is it was very much a game that I started, I got rolled credits on, and I've beaten. But I will say, to the game's credit, they have released a steady stream of updates, and a credit to the game's like sort of charm and the writing is that like it's been worth coming back to for those little tidbits.
That's what I was going to ask. I mean, because I remember we talked about this. I think it was like August or something. And you weren't sure because it basically didn't seem to have a whole lot of replayability. So I was curious if the updates that they dropped have gotten you to go back for a little bit more, despite having finished the mostly linear campaign.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's kind of the best case scenario for what like, updates for a game like this look like. I think, going back to Stardew Valley, like one of my bigger complaints with it is that a lot of the post-launch updates have been more like technical, like back-end stuff. Mm-hmm. Whereas this, they're very much intertwining gameplay updates and improvements with additional story content. So, going back to that, like just charming cast of characters, like it did feel good to go back and, with the updated version, and with the first update, like there's an additional store expansion that gets, unlocked, and like, so there's like meaningful gameplay, enhancements that are being added. And then there's also the story on top of it. So I'm impressed with it. So if they can keep up the rate, I think this is something that like, a year from now, or whenever they reach like a 2.0 or whatever they want to call it, it could be something really robust. And I mean, like I would have no issues recommending it to anyone right now. I think it's $20, and it is well worth that. I spent like 30 to 40 hours playing this. Like it's really addictive. A fun story about this one. So it was the number 10 slot kind of came down between the two indie darlings in my house this year, Discounty and Megabonk. And Lydia was actually the tie-breaking vote, and she voted for Discounty. I think she made the right choice, because Discounty is just, like I said, it's charming, it's fun, it's addictive. So if you're a fan of like cozy games in general, it's a hard one not to recommend.
Yeah, I'm not surprised to see this on your list, knowing your preferences for games. I'm actually maybe more surprised that it's this low on your list, but yeah, good to see it there.
That's number 10. So moving on to number 9, Matthew, hit me with it.
All right, my number 9 is an interesting one. This is one that we have not discussed on the podcast before. It is Many Nights a Whisper by Deconstruct Team.
Ooh, I recognize that name. Those are the Broforce guys, right?
So they made Red Strings Club, which is, I think, their most maybe well-known or popular game. They also did Cosmic Wheel Sisterhood a couple years ago. But those are both kind of point-and-click type pixel adventures, whereas this, I believe, is their first game that takes place where you control a person in a three-dimensional world.
Okay.
And they've also announced a small side note here. They announced their next game in the lead up to the Game Awards earlier this month. I am blanking on the name of it, but you play as like a robot and you're breaking things with a sledgehammer. Anyway, I'm sure we'll be talking more about that next year because I'm definitely going to play it. But yeah, Deconstruct Team is the developer. So Many Nights a Whisper is a short, film-length game about archery, essentially. You are a chosen young adult from your village or civilization that has been trained since you're very young to essentially make a impossibly long archery shot, and that one shot on the night of the trial will determine whether your civilization will have 10 years of prosperity, where the wishes that everyone has gets granted, or it will fall into 10 years of basically poverty and despair, where people's wishes don't come true and things like that. So the game is essentially split between two halves. One where you are practicing archery, by hitting these cauldrons that are out on the water and the land around you, and the other half is you are listening to your villagers' wishes that they bring to you each night. And if you accept their wish, you essentially cut their hair off, and you keep their hair to strengthen your bow. So if you're not accepting people's wishes, because you either don't agree that should be a thing that happens, and some of their wishes are quite outlandish, like, I want to be, I want everybody to love me or something like that.
Yeah.
Versus things that are
so
very
there's some agency, some choice in like how you're picking like the what wishes to take, to grant.
Yes, you fully can choose, but the problem is that this would only happen if you were attempting to do a run like this. But if you don't accept any wishes, your bow is not going to be strong enough to make the shot to grant anybody's wish.
Right.
So yeah, essentially
you have to find that balance.
Yes, you could accept everybody's wish if you wanted to, but it's your choice. And the short runtime means that the game ends after you take the shot. You either make it or you don't, and you see the consequences of that, but it ends after that with you to kind of reflect on your success or failure and what that means for the people that you heard from. So it's very kind of like contemplative game, mixed with like good writing and an interesting perspective that kind of goes back to that uniqueness of experience ethos that I was talking about, where it's really unlike anything else that I've played. And the run up, like when you're practicing for that shot, you only have one shot, and the bow is difficult enough to control to where you really feel like you are practicing lining up your shots and how much force you're putting on each pull, on each time you draw it back. and you have to actually master that thing through your own skill and your own practice in order to be able to make the shot at the end of the game. So
yeah, it's really interesting. Like, like really every part of the game is in service of this just one make or break moment. And I mean, I think I've got the Steam page listed up here, and I think the description here is very like helpful for like explaining like what this game is and sort of like what emotions it's going for. So it's a short interactive essay on dreams, pressure, and expectations. Take part in an ancient ritual where one shot determines the fate of a generation. And like, yeah, like, I mean, I can imagine, like with that sort of setup and like this sort of, one and done, opportunity, like, yeah, I can imagine there's a lot of, opportunity for telling a story about, pressure and expectations. So seems like a really cool experience.
Definitely. Yeah, I would absolutely recommend it. It's short runtime, not that expensive. I would definitely recommend anybody who's looking for some kind of a unique gaming experience that you might not find in any other game in 2025.
Yeah, it's $3 on Steam, currently on sale as part of the Steam Winter Sale for $2.24. So I might pick this up and give it a shot. Moving on, sticking with number 9, but my number 9 is Ninja Gaiden Ragebound.
Ooh.
So we did cover this one earlier on the show. This one ultimately came down to this or the other ninja-like, which I played in between when we talked about Ragebound and now, which is Shinobi Art of Vengeance. And I think why this made the cut over that is what I would describe as pixel perfect level design, right? Like, it just felt everything had a purpose, and the level design really did such a great job of evoking like a Hotline Miami, where you could just go on these runs and, with the ability to switch between protagonists and, like different enemies would require you to attack it with a certain enemy. So essentially you would have to do a very specific input, very specific combo, which, I think there's a higher degree of difficulty, but ultimately when you did it, it paid off. And like, it was just these really sick combos. But yeah, I mean, it's a Ninja Gaiden game. So for those of you who, are familiar with the genre, it's, a 2D action platformer. It's very like, it is what it is. You're not gonna get like, there's nothing like, it doesn't really subvert expectations. It doesn't really like, it's a good Ninja Gaiden game. But for me, like, I think just the level design in this one, was really, really well thought out, and how it, how the level design worked with that second protagonist and the different combat styles. I thought it was really memorable.
This really was the year of the ninja. I mean, there were a lot of ninja and, shinobi style games. Or games
I had to represent.
Yeah. And so I guess this didn't. Did you play Ninja Gaiden 4? I mean, I don't know if this sparked your interest enough to try that out, and that didn't click with you as much, or
I dabbled in it for a little bit, not enough to say whether or not like I had strong feelings on it one way or the other. It didn't give me a very good first impression. It felt a little dated in terms of, like what it felt, very much felt like, what a 3D Ninja Gaiden game feels like. But it felt like it hadn't aged in all the right ways.
That was one that I was on my list to play this year. It was one that I didn't get to. Not that I think it would have made my top 10, but yeah. And Ragebound, like we talked about back when we originally discussed it. It's not really my sort of game, but it looks really nice to look at. I've watched a good number of videos and streams of it, and it's a pretty satisfying looking game to watch as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, and yeah, I didn't mention the artwork. The developer name is blanking me, or is avoiding me now. But they did such a good job with Blasphemous, and that like they're such a good like unique pixel art style here as well. So yeah, no, I mean it's like I said, it's if you like Ninja Gaiden, if you like good Ninja Gaiden, this is I would say this is like if there's one of 3 Ninja games that you play this year, this is the one.
The Game Kitchen, I think, is the developers there.
Yep. Perfect.
Awesome.
Moving on to number 8, Matthew, hit me with it.
My number 8 game, speaking of ninjas, sort of, Assassin's Creed Shadows.
Nice.
Yes. The Assassin's Creed series, I know for many, has fallen out of favor in recent years. And I also won't deny that, the last couple, like specifically Odyssey and Valhalla, have not really taken a like the series in a trajectory that I would have preferred. Mm-hmm. But I'm obviously by its presence here on the list, I think that Assassin's Creed Shadows sort of rights the ship, and how long have we been talking about getting a Assassin's Creed game set in Japan? It's pretty much since the series began, and we finally got it. And I don't know how anybody who has been anticipating it for that long could be wholly disappointed in this game. I mean, it is exactly what I always wanted from a Assassin's Creed game set in Japan, which is you get to do cool samurai stuff. You get to do cool shinobi stuff. You can assassinate people. You can also, duel people as a samurai. It's got a good story that sets, that intersects with actual historical events that happened in Japan. And the world is beautiful, and you can actually learn about the culture and sort of the norms of that time in the typical way that the last few Assassin's Creed have allowed for, in like the educational mode or just when you're playing the game normally. So it's a game that I sunk 50 plus hours into and actually completed, unlike the last two. Didn't get to the DLC this year, but I do want to go back and play that because it not spoiling any of the ending, but it kind of leaves a few plot threads hanging that I believe are addressed in the DLC. But yeah, I mean, it's Assassin's Creed in Japan. That's basically the gist of it.
Hard not to recommend it on that. So you mentioned, I mean, the one thing that really interests me about, what you said about it at the top was that it rights the ship, relative to what the last 2 games have done. In what ways? I mean, and this is someone who, like I was sort of passively interested in Valhalla and Odyssey, but like, yeah, I think the fantastical elements, sort of turned me off to those games. So like, what in your mind was the determining factor in like, okay, yeah, no, this is actually like the right level of, whatever.
The big thing for me, well, I guess one of the big things for me is that in splitting the protagonist out into 2 different characters, which you can't fully play through it, one or the other. So you're going to have to do some of both, but it gives you you're making a decision when you approach, 90% of the scenarios that you encounter in the game, and which kind of approach you want to take. And whereas in previous games, specifically Valhalla was really bad about this. It didn't matter what you like, how you wanted to approach something, because you could do anything. Eivor was probably the most overpowered character, like protagonist in the history of the series, because he was just like an incredibly good fighter, but also, like he could do assassination stuff too. And by making each of the protagonists a little bit weaker and making them more specialized, you have to actually commit to the way that you want to play, and you got to role play a little bit, and it introduced an element of choice and of danger and failure that the series hadn't really had in the last couple.
Nice. Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely have been more interested in this one than the recent ones, and it being on your list has sort of pushed me to at least give it a try. But yeah, I mean,
It's not a
it'll
perfect
be
game. I mean,
yeah.
it's still too long. It's shorter than the last two, but it's still too long. The narrative kind of winds around itself in, despite having strong moments within the story, some of it is overly long and a little bit too exposition heavy, or focuses on, kind of uninteresting scenarios. But at the end of the day, it's all very immersive, and the world is just amazing to explore and everything. So, yeah, not it's not my favorite game in the series, I would say, but it is very good, and I think a good indicator that the series still has, they're listening to what people are saying, and it's still got some life in it.
Interested to see what's next. But yeah, no, good to hear that Assassin's Creed Shadows is worthwhile. Moving on to my number 8. It's Donkey Kong Bonanza. Ooh, banana.
I have this higher on my list.
I had a feeling this was going to be our first one, so
Yes.
I will pass it back to you, Matthew. Let's go to number 7.
Fittingly, my number 7 is Donkey Kong Bonanza.
Let's go.
So we almost lined up there.
I was nervous. I was like, oh my God, what if it's his game of the year?
No.
Just kidding.
Yeah, so
yeah.
you want to take this one away first? Yeah.
Yeah, this is an interesting one because I sunk a lot of time into Donkey Kong, and I mean, like, it for a while there, it consumed my life, and like, ooh, banana was a legit vocal stim. And to this day, like, me and the kids, like, will just ooh banana to each other. So it like, in that, like, how much of a, like, emotional impact, like, it definitely deserves the spot here. Like, obviously it is a very high quality game. I think it looks beautiful. I think it, like, the punching gameplay it's interesting, it's unique. I think I think this game is at its best when it is forcing you to do things other than just straight up punch things. So like a couple of the enemies that sort of stood out to me are like the guys that when you punch them, they make like that ramp, and you have to like create your own terrain to cross these areas and solve the puzzles. I thought that was really unique. And then the burger level where like you have to throw the salt on the acid to sort of break up the acid. Like, I think those moments where like you were picking up the different elements and interacting, or like watching them, making them interact with one another in interesting ways, I think those were like sort of the highlights for me. And then there were times like the dump level where it was just nothing but punching and just the camera that wouldn't cooperate. And so I think I came down on it a little bit more positively when I rolled credits compared to Mario Odyssey. But I think like the further away I get from it, I still think Odyssey is I think it's just the better game overall. Like, it's got the more memorable story. I mean, I think Donkey Kong, like the musical sequences with the Bonanza powers, like, I think those were all really good and really well done. But outside of that, like, there wasn't really much to the game. There wasn't really much to the story. So yeah, what about you?
Yeah, I totally agree that from a gameplay perspective, the best parts here where, in true Nintendo fashion, they're not just giving you an interesting mechanic, which is the ability that you can break anything, but they're making you use that in interesting ways, both to destroy and also create, like you said, to create your own paths, to create your ramps, and make the environment interact with each other. So the way that each of the successive worlds built on that in interesting ways was fantastic. I loved that, and that was really the standout for me. The other element that I really liked here, and really colors my memory of playing this over the summer. This was was the Switch 2 launch for me. Like this game will always be synonymous with the Switch 2 launch. Mario Kart World did not hit the same way that I thought it was going to, which ended up being fine because we had Bonanza right after it. And the second thing is that this game had a co-op mode, and my wife and I we look for games like this to play co-op in, and despite one person having like a simpler experience, by controlling Pauline on their back.
Classic Nintendo.
Yeah, it actually was a lot of fun to play that way. More fun than I would say like the Hat was in Odyssey. This was a little bit more dynamic, and you actually were making more impactful contributions to clearing out paths and defeating enemies and stuff. So we played through the entire game in co-op, and that was, I think,
that's awesome.
Maybe the only game that we played like cover to cover in co-op this year. So that was a really fun experience for me as well.
Yeah. The only other gripe I'll list, the only other grievance I'll list is that some of the Bonanza abilities are underutilized. So, I mean, like, I feel like maybe there's a good, like, 3 or maybe even 4 of them that I feel like, you're able to, like, you have these, meaningful sequences with them. But, like, the snake one comes to mind where that felt like a throw in.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like, there's, I would love, I don't know. I think this game,
the snake was nowhere near as impactful as the bird that you could actually glide with. It's just not going to have that same impact. I do think there was maybe room to either change that, like some of those abilities a little bit to make them as useful, or maybe more levels that you could have added, or just sub levels even to take advantage of them a little bit more. But yeah, I think the whole experience with collecting those powers and the elders and the rings and everything.
Oh yeah,
that was awesome. Like that was a side of Donkey Kong that was like new and fresh, and is something I'll remember from the game.
And the ending was phenomenal too. We won't spoil it, but fans of Nintendo, fans of Donkey Kong, like, you will absolutely adore the ending.
Yes.
It definitely was like I think it was a better ending. Like, I think that's why I came down on this initially feeling higher than Mario Odyssey, because the ending was so strong. So yeah, that's Donkey Kong Bonanza, y'all. It's my number 8, Matthew's number 7. So we're going to go straight on into my number 7, and we're going to keep it with Nintendo with Metroid Prime 4.
Wow.
We just talked about this. Yeah, we just talked about this on the last episode. But in the meantime, I have rolled credits, and outside of a boss fight that made me question the NPC's involvement, it very much lived up to the experience that I was having the last time we talked about it, which is that this is a very good Metroid Prime game. The level design is, I would argue, among some of the best in the series, at least when we're talking about like just the actual, environment, the actual dungeons, if you will. Visually it just looks amazing. Like it's the best looking Nintendo game. Like, I can nitpick Donkey Kong Bonanza because it drops some frames. Metroid Prime 4 does not drop frames, and it looks just as good, if not better. It really is one of the best looking Nintendo games I've ever seen. Outside of, that one boss fight, I think the NPC sort of, drama, if you will, was sort of overblown. The part I allude to in the boss fight, this isn't really so much a spoiler, but all of the NPCs that have sort of accompanied you up to, this point are with you for the final fight. However, you are responsible for making sure all of them or none of them die, and they're just not the best about doing that. So yeah, it was a questionable design decision for the last boss fight, but I mean, up until that, other than that, like, I think this is a really good game. The open world obviously is the underbaked section here, or was the part that I felt was underbaked. it definitely could have used some more time in the oven. It definitely could have used some more focus there, or just removing that part out entirely. But I like the concept, even though they weren't able to sort of execute on it fully here. So I would love it. It's a shame because it seems like it's not gonna do well commercially. So I don't know, if and when we get a Metroid Prime 5. But if we do get something, from Retro, another Metroid game, I would like to see, the open world idea fleshed out more.
So where do you, I guess we talked about this a little bit, but that was before you finished the game. I mean, how does this stack up to like Metroid Prime 1? And I can't remember if you'd played either the other two in the mainline series, but in the Metroid franchise overall, how does this ultimately stack up amongst your favorites? And I guess my second part of the question would be, you put this above another Nintendo game.
Yeah.
Was there a specific factor that made you kind of put them in this order right next to each other?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good conversation. That's a good observation to point out, where I think Metroid Prime 4 I think Donkey Kong Bonanza is the more ambitious game, but I think Metroid Prime 4 is the more polished game, where, or not, polish is probably not I think a lot of Donkey Kong's ideas some of Donkey Kong's ideas don't necessarily hit, where Metroid Prime 4 is more safe, just executed at a higher level, if that makes sense.
I see.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, I wouldn't go out of my way to say that this is like the best Metroid Prime game, and to be clear, I haven't, rolled credits on any other Metroid Prime game except the first one. But, I've at least touched on them all. And I think, I'm biased because I just enjoy these games. We don't get a lot of these kinds of games where it's, a first person Metroidvania. So I'm just always sort of like glad to have it. But yeah, I really struggle to find things wrong with this game that aren't related to the open world. Really, I think, another thing I didn't mention is it's super cinematic. It's very much like it feels like a step forward for Nintendo published games, that, like actually having cutscenes with dialogue in them, which it sounds so funny to say it, but like, for Nintendo, it's a novel thing. So, I think seeing stuff like that was really sort of what pushed it over in my mind, where like, I think Donkey Kong was just really clever and creative uses of like the destruction, and like, it was just a game that sort of like hooked me with its mechanics, whereas I think Metroid Prime 4, in my mind, it did what it sort of set out to do a little bit better.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's sort of a shame to hear, oh, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say both are very like flawed, I think, games. In one way or the other. With Metroid, the semi-open world, and then Donkey Kong just like not quite hitting. So I think there was a little bit of back and forth on which one I would have where here, and I think in a lot of ways, in my mind, you could flip flop them in terms of like how much I enjoyed them both.
Yeah, and I think in talking about my sort of my guiding principle of looking towards new experiences, I think that is one reason why I didn't prioritize playing this game. One, because I hadn't played the originals, but also because this, in hearing you talk about it and reading about it, it did seem like it was, staying pretty close rather than trying to do something way new and groundbreaking in the same way that, they did with Bonanza and the Donkey Kong franchise. I will say though that this is kind of like top of my list for, depending on the free time between the new releases that start dropping in February or whenever. I may try to squeeze this one in because I am curious about it. But it's a shame to hear that it's not selling that well, because that may mean that we get another long wait for the follow up. Yeah,
no, and it's I would highly recommend it. It's Yeah, it's a technical showpiece for the Switch, and I struggle to find anything like inherently bad about it. Like it's there's a lot of good, like if you're a fan of Metroidvanias in general, there's a lot of good elements there, and like I think the weapons are all really good. The bike, even though the open world segments are like sort of undercooked, like riding around on the bike is fun. So yeah, no, I mean, I definitely recommend it if you get the time for it. It's not super long. It's like 10 to 15 hours. And yeah, no, I mean, that's Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. And yeah, let's move on to our number 6 game. Matthew, what you got for us?
This one is one that I highly expect you to have on your list. I'm just not sure where. Arc Raiders.
I also have Arc Raiders as my number 6 game of the
year. Wow. Look at that synchronicity.
You love to see it. Yep. Let's talk about Arc Raiders, Matthew. Take the lead.
Yeah. So we talked about Arc Raiders here, but I mean, this is just a really strong and unique take on the extraction shooter. This is probably my favorite multiplayer game since... competitive multiplayer game since Valorant launched in 2020. It just has the sauce. I mean, every game that you're in, every round is unique and different in its own way. There's always the possibility for something to go wrong, either extremely wrong or extremely right in a run, all the way up until the very moment you extract. You'll have runs where you don't interact with any other players at all, and you just, you get your loot and you get out. And then there's others that seem like cursed from the get-go, where, people start firing at you right away, and you're just, it's just scrappy and until you either finally die or make it out. And, the hit rate in terms of like interesting rounds to boring rounds is extremely high. Like they always seem to have a new sort of thing happening to you in these rounds.
Yeah, I mean, and I think the thing that really stands out is that even though it's PvPvE, it doesn't matter whether or not you're facing, strictly AI opponents or if you're going out and engaging with other raiders. Each of those encounters is tense because the enemy AI is just so good at like locating you. They hunt you down, like they are just relentless. So it really just adds to this layer of fear and tension. Yeah, I mean, I can't, what else can I say about these encounters, man? Like it's, I wasn't a believer in the concept of emergent gameplay until I think I played this game. It's the most transformative multiplayer experience since PUBG, really, in my mind, where like, just not knowing another player's intentions, what that does to certain encounters. And then through that, the community being able to come together and cooperate and take down some of the more fearsome enemies. Like that just makes those moments and those stories all the more impressive.
And still, and even those big moments of cooperation still always have the possibility of betrayal. Like it could happen at any moment, Yeah, I mean, I think the PUBG comparison is a good one, because PUBG kind of launched the battle royale genre, whereas it doesn't invent the extraction shooter genre, but it was amazing to see how, we hear about all these extraction shooters getting developed, and everybody is kind of just like, oh, why does everybody think this is going to work? Why do people keep trying to make this? Like, it's not going to work. Nobody wants this. And how quickly those sort of comments went away after Arc Raiders launched. Like, you don't hear anybody saying that anymore. Like this proves what everybody has been chasing with this genre. It found a way to reliably deliver the experiences that this genre is capable of, and that is truly remarkable.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's shout out to the inventory system and the quest system, both just in terms of their simplicity, like relative simplicity to other extraction shooters, but then just being, an onboarding tool for new players to help you learn the new maps and, get you to start using inventory, teaching you how to use certain items and craft certain items. Like it all it all built in a way that felt extremely satisfying as somebody who doesn't have a lot of time to commit to online multiplayer games anymore. So yeah, it's absolutely one that I'm going to be going back to. Also, another thing I'm going to mention, this world just is so, they do so much with so little, like the audio design, the short little, like audio clips that you get. And obviously like the art direction and all of that, like it feels like a lived-in world that I haven't really experienced since like Half-Life 2 specifically, where it's just, got this bleakness, this just oppressive bleakness. I don't know, man.
It's very distinct. Setting it in Italy, I think is a bold choice that kind of paid off, away from, it's not New York or some other, instantly iconic location. It's just kind of the countryside of Italy, basically. And I think that decision really paid off and aligns perfectly with the vibe that the game is going for. Like you mentioned the story and the quest systems. I'm actually really interested with the ways that they try to evolve that, in future seasons as they open up new maps and characters like NPCs and stuff. So I think that comparing this to something like Destiny, where I quickly became uninterested with the meta narrative going on in the seasons, it remains to be seen what they do with what they have here. But there's definitely potential there if they choose to lean into the narrative aspect.
Yeah, I'm excited to see like what the new year brings with Arc Raiders, and I'm sure they've got a great content roadmap lined up. But it's and that's another thing is it's been getting frequent updates. Like I've been playing through this winter mode, and yeah, I mean I think going back to what you were saying, the hit rate on matches being exciting versus boring is just exceptionally high towards being exciting. I had like just 2 or 3 rounds today where it was just memorable, like some of the more memorable moments I've had in an online shooter. So yeah, shout out to Arc Raiders. I imagine I'm going to be playing a lot more of this game in the coming future. And yeah, shout out to making me a believer in the extraction shooter, because I was one of those haters.
100%.
All right, Matthew, we both, Arc Raiders is both our number 6, so you're up for number 5. What's your number 5?
All right, number 5, this is one that I don't think you're going to have on your list. Sword of the Sea by Giant
Ooh, Squid. I'm interested. I'm glad that it made your list. I was interested to see if it was going to make your list. It's one that it's probably one that I'm going to get to, but sell me again on Sword of the Sea.
Sword of the Sea is... It's in the vein of something like Journey. It's by the creators of Abzu. It is not really a walking simulator, or the previous games I should say have been not exactly walking simulators. This one goes further away from the walking simulator and more towards a platformer / movement based game, in that you are riding on a sword that kind of operates like a skateboard or surfboard. And yeah, you're kind of fluidly moving throughout this environment, doing tricks and reaching new heights and ledges and exploring the environment, grinding on railings and massive chains that connect buildings together. Really, what it boils down to is just kind of a chill experience where you're listening to an excellent score by Austin Wintory and exploring like what is a like just beautiful world where the sand beneath your feet kind of ripples like waves in the ocean. It's just an audio visual feast that it just kept me gripped from beginning to end.
Yeah, this seems like it's the I was never like I couldn't get into Abzu, but this seems like right up my alley, just in terms of like the art style, which looks beautiful, but then also the more of the focus on movement. So I'm definitely going to try and make time for this one.
I think that's exactly right. I think this game it was designed to appeal more towards somebody who wants a more game-ish kind of experience when they're in a world like this, right? Like Abzu,
they're fighting back against.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was saying they're fighting back against the walking sim
The allegations.
accusations.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think they do it well. And this is not really a spoiler, but new game plus mode, you actually get like a score counter on your tricks that you're doing.
Oh,
and everything.
Cool.
So if you want to lean even further into the skateboarding element of this, then you can try to speed run and get a high score on your second playthrough, which is really cool and is further proof that they know exactly what they're doing here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean that's Sword of the Sea, and yeah, I definitely want to make time for it.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
One last thing I want to comment on here, because if any listeners who've been listening throughout the year, I've had a lot of negative things to say about endings of games this year. I think there's been, I don't know if this has always been the case, and it's just been most noticeable to me this year, but these games that came out this year, I almost universally had problems with the way that they ended. Sword of the Sea, excellent ending of this game. One of my favorite ending levels of the year. So, and Bonanza had a great ending level as well, which we just talked about. But yeah, this one probably from a ending gameplay, like final level perspective, I think Sword of the Sea probably has number one spot for me this year.
Nice. Well, that's Sword of the Sea. Check it out, y'all. Where are we? We're at my number 5. My number 5 is Citizen Sleeper 2, Starward Vector.
I have this higher. Actually, I'll go ahead and say this is my number 4 game. So we can talk about it now as my number 4 and your number 5.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, this is, and actually I would love to hear you sort of set the stage, because I know you've played it more recently and I wasn't able to go back to it. So talk to me, Matthew, about Citizen Sleeper 2 and why you loved it so much.
I think Citizen Sleeper 2, it's definitely, I would say this is probably my favorite narrative of the year. I mean, this is a game, we can talk about the dice mechanics, which I think translate extremely well from like a tabletop style game to a video game format. But this really is a game that is about the writing and the world and the characters. It is, Citizen Sleeper 1, I will say, was my runner-up for Game of the Year in 2022 when it came out. And I just finished Citizen Sleeper 2, so I kind of handicapped myself because I didn't want to like rank it too high until I've had some time to sit on it. It could be higher than this for me, but I put it at number 4, which I thought it definitely was not any lower than that. But yeah, I mean the writing is exceptional. It's a game that is ultimately about finding faith in humanity when things are bad, and that is
finding community, man.
Humanity, yeah. And even when you're not doing so well, and when the world itself is like completely hostile and uncaring, it ironically finds like the most human story in a game where you're playing as like an artificial human. So
it's a similar kind of world to Arc Raiders, where it's just like this oppressive bleakness. But yeah, it does find, even on a turn-by-turn basis, cycle-by-cycle basis, like it does find ways to sort of give you hope and ways to, make you feel like things are looking up despite like the more serious circumstances.
Yeah, and I think, this game, evolving from the first game, this one also takes on sort of the gig economy, right? Like you and your crew are taking on jobs in order to survive, and the game is very well balanced for that. Like you can't just you literally have to take these jobs in order to make ends meet. Maybe up until the very end of the game when you get a nice little cushion But
Yeah.
like for the majority of the game, you are living job to job. Like it can feel very.
And there's a real sense of danger when you're on these jobs too. Like these aren't just like casual, chill. Like there are real stakes, and I think the game does a great job of. I mean, I didn't play Citizen Sleeper 1 all the way to finish, but I think one of my issues with that one was just sort of how punishing some of the dice rolls and some failures could have been. Whereas I think this in 2 they did a good job of balancing it a little bit better. But that being said, like when you're on these delves or these missions, it's tense, it's chaotic, and like anything could go wrong at a moment's notice. And
and if you're out there and you fail, you don't get paid. Like there's and it's tuned to where that can happen sometimes. The roll you get some bad dice rolls, or you don't plan well enough, or you're just not able to bring everything that you need with you. Yeah, you're gonna fail that job. And it's I would say that I think it's interesting that you found some of the difficulty of the first one more punishing, because what I found ultimately in the first game was that once you reached a certain point, you had all of the tools that you needed in order to survive indefinitely, right? Like in the first game, you were all about finding stabilizer, which your body needed in order to not like break down, essentially. And I feel like once you got to a point where stabilizer was somewhat more obtainable, the game it was mostly trivial at that point, at least from my recollection. In this game, stabilizer is not. It's not a mechanic. Your sleeper doesn't need that for reasons that are explained in the story. And I think the way that they impose the difficulties that you and your team experience through other means, such as just money or supplies or whatever, I think made it feel better, and it made it a little bit more sustainable throughout the runtime of the game.
Yeah. No, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and one thing I will say too about this is just I've always been somebody who has struggled to find like groups to sort of consistently play like TTRPGs with. And like, so I've always had an eye out for like what are ways that, solo players can sort of take advantage. And like, this is sort of just the perfect setup, just both mechanically and just how the story is being delivered in both the first one and in this one, where it's just, like I like we haven't really touched on like the gameplay systems itself, but like just having that simple idea of just having rolling your dice and using them for whatever you need. It's there's so much flexibility to it. There's so much and I think just how they apply it to like average, normal, everyday situations. I think it's just it's such an engrossing, like an immersive experience, despite it being like presented as a board game.
Yes, and I think the key, the secret sauce here is the ways in which your dice represent your body, like your you as a person. If you become broken by stress, or you have stress, or you take physical harm or whatever, your dice glitch, like maybe it's equivalent to your body can't perform as well, and therefore this dice is glitched and is almost always going to result in a failure or something like that. So the way that they find a mechanical way to associate like the narrative position of your character in a way that matches in the gameplay is as good or better than anything I have seen in actual tabletop, role-playing systems.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and even for, some of these big budget, AAA games, like, narrative, like what it's doing on a narrative level, just being a text-based game. I think, I mean, it's doing things that other big budget games aren't doing.
Yeah. I mean, I thought about like, there's one parallel mission in Outer Worlds to a mission in Citizen Sleeper where you're basically investigating like the aftermath of a catastrophe that's happened in both situations. And in Outer Worlds, in Outer Worlds 2, you're using your speech and your intellect and whatever your other skills to kind of be able to notice things. But if your stats are too weak, your character can't pick up on something that you as the player can see happen, right? Like there's a disconnect there. Whereas in a similar situation in Citizen Sleeper, it all comes down to the dice, like the dice, you may be pressed for time and you only have a certain number of dice, essentially cycles where you can play dice in order to figure it out or something. And it creates a very tense environment without the need to heavily rely on what the more traditional RPGs would use, which is like your character's stats. So it shows another path for some of these kind of role-playing games that, not saying that everything has to incorporate dice the way that this does, but it shows that there are other options out there for solving similar gameplay scenarios that we've seen in other places for a while.
Yeah, and I think there's always kind of been an aversion to sort of like showing the dice rolls, in gameplay, because we all know, right? Like, most gameplay is just a series of dice rolls and just figuring out what's happening. So I mean, like to actually like visually display it in that way, it really adds tension and it really like adds to the character of the game as well.
For sure.
Moving on to my number 4 game. This one I think is going to interest you. It's Ghost of Yōtei.
Wow.
It is. The more I think about Ghost of Yōtei, I think ultimately I was let down by the story. However, the open world, the combat, and just the combination of all that plus the all the different activities that you could do, sort of it just ended up like this ended up being my comfort game this year, or one of my comfort games, where it's just a world that I kept coming back to even after I rolled credits. Like I went back and like I was going through and like clearing out some of the map, and I think a big part of that is mainly the combat, like all of the different, like how they adopted, like instead of using the different stances, having the different weapons and then tying that into different characters that would give you the upgrades and like you would go and train with and build relationships with. I thought that was all really well done. But then just, by the end of the game, you have this just full arsenal and you can tackle any of these combat scenarios in any sort of way. Like I thought it was really inventive from a combat standpoint. I mean, I think there's criticisms that you can make about the open world structure. It is very, very similar to Ghost of Tsushima, which at the time that it came out was sort of formulaic and like kind of tried and true, open world formula. This once again does not reinvent the wheel. But, I think the ways that it does excel, mainly in the gameplay. And then I do think, despite the story not hitting as well, Erika Ishii as Atsu is still one of the best performances of the year. The emotion in a lot of these scenes. And like, I think there's a lot of, moral dilemma type questions like that get introduced. I am disappointed ultimately that they don't go as far with them as I wish they would have, but I do think the strength of the performances elevate what is an otherwise like sort of like by the numbers video game story.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad this is on your list because it gives us an opportunity to talk about it, because I think from a conversation perspective, I mean, obviously we had an episode on this earlier this year, but I think for me, it was one of the more interesting games to think about. This landed somewhere in the middle of the pack of the games that I played this year. And I say that I platinumed this game. Like I played this game a lot. But ultimately, and this is kind of what I was alluding to, at the beginning of the episode, is that despite it feeling pretty good when I was playing it, outside of some combat flourishes, which are legitimately excellent and had felt very good, like thinking specifically about the like sword throw ability, like that never gets old. But a lot of the time that I was playing this, I was in the checkbox mentality that people criticize Assassin's Creed for. I was just following points on a map, and everything looks great. Everything, the graphics are gorgeous, and it feels good. It's all fluid, but the actual things that I was doing, while they felt good, I was on autopilot. I wasn't having to think about it. A lot of the stuff didn't have anything to do with the story. Some of it did, but it's all set up in a way that it has been done many, many times before.
It feels templatized in a way. I will say that. And yeah, I mean, I think one thing I will say, kind of shout out in terms of the open world design, is just how you get the different notes and the different maps from people. And I think we talked about this in our previous episode where we covered it, where like there's some Red Dead Redemption 2 specifically in this game's DNA, where like you do have these conversations with sort of passerby, and they're giving you clues and hints as to like where things are, and like I think that all sort of helped flesh out the world in a way that the first one didn't have, and it sort of combated that. Like it did feel like I was organically finding these places as opposed to going through and doing the checklisting. Now, once you sort of get everything marked on your map, it does just become the checklist thing. So it is just kind of an extra step. But I did think that was sort of a novel approach to sort of, avoiding the clutter, but then, giving you way, I guess, giving you a creative way to add to the clutter.
Yeah, I felt that, with the side stuff, that was kind of an interesting note. I thought it was very interesting how early on, it sort of gestured at being like non-linear in the way that you're uncovering clues about different members of the Yōtei Six, and you're like, oh wow, like I could just pursue any of these. Like I'm following up on this lead and that lead, and it's all just kind of organically happening in ways that it seemed pretty novel. But as soon as you get past that second, your first meeting essentially with the big bad, it's like, oh, like you're not really going to let me do this. You're going to basically split me down to one of two paths and then put me back on the narrative path. And that's basically it. Which was very disappointing. It seemed like it was going to be a bit more audacious than it ended up being for me. So I agree. I think that's a good way to summarize it. Where I definitely questioned having it as high on my list, but I think it ultimately just comes down to the more gameplay, things where it is just, if I want to boot up a game that looks really good and, like the combat, like has really good combat and, a bunch of stuff for me to do, like this is kind of the game. This is one of two games that I would boot up. But yeah, I mean, it was just, I think, Ezo was such a, really like a wonderfully realized world. So it's like I said, it's just one of those games that like despite having my issues and my qualms about it, I did put a good amount of time into it, and I definitely think is worthy of a lot of the praise that it's getting. Yeah, I mean, like speaking positives here, you mentioned Erika Ishii's performance. I totally agree that it's probably, if not number one, definitely top 3 performances of the year. Like she was fantastic. If I was recommending a game to somebody who plays 3 games a year or something and they wanted something cool, this would be on the short list to recommend them for sure. I think that, for somebody who has played a lot of these types of games, it isn't quite as appealing despite, on the surface playing well, feeling good, looking good.
Yeah. It checks all the boxes, but yeah, it's not really doing anything truly unique here.
Right. And the last thing I'll say is back to my ending pet peeve. I hated the ending of this game. It was terrible, personally.
The ending was a complete wet fart. No, it was not so much a wet fart as it is just like we could have seen it coming from a mile away. It was very predictable. It sort of telegraphed itself. And yeah, like none of what I remember this game will be for its story. Sadly, it will be because of the protagonist and like the more like nuts and bolts gameplay stuff. Yeah, one of the weaker Sucker Punch stories for sure.
Unfortunately, yeah, I agree.
All right, Matthew, it's top 3 time. It's time to batten down the hatches.
All right.
What's gonna be?
Yep. My number 3 is, too bad Wes is not here, because it is Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 by Warhorse Studios.
I love it. Yes. Tell me all about Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. Convince me to give it a proper try.
Okay. Yeah. So I think we did talk about this on a previous episode. I don't know if it aired, if we actually posted it or not. But regardless, that was towards the beginning of the year. And this is a game that I played a lot in the spring, put down for a long while, and got back to within the past month or so, and have been kind of playing some more of it. This is kind of the way I describe this game is this is kind of a game from an alternate reality where we took the Bethesda game trajectory, and instead of moving from Morrowind towards Oblivion, we kind of leaned into the more systems heavy Morrowind mechanics.
Yeah.
And then you take that and then you put it in an actual like medieval history game in the style of Assassin's Creed. That's basically how I describe this. It's sort of surprising how well this game works when, I mean, on paper, this sounds like a boring game. Like,
yeah,
you were in like Bohemia, essentially. You are like a nobody knight, or not even a knight. You're just like I forget what your title is, but you play as Henry, who's like the assistant to some kind of lower noble, and you're just getting up to shenanigans that happen to be during a wartime, essentially. And yeah, so it becomes, you role playing essentially. You get a massive leeway to role play Henry the way that you want, and level up in an organic fashion across this massive world.
Let's dive into that, because I feel like, every time I talk about this game, I sort of dance around the systems. What systems stood out to you? There's a lot of stuff going on under the hood of this game. Like what was sort of the standout features or systems that you interacted with?
So I think, a lot, but what I'll comment on is, I think one of the more impressive ones, which is like the reputation and law system, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So if let's say you steal something off of, well, for simplicity, let's say you steal it out of somebody's store or whatever. Mm-hmm. If they catch you, you either pay a fine or you get arrested, depending on how serious it is or whether it's your first offense. They keep track of offenses too. So like if you are,
oh man,
or if you already have a warrant out for your arrest and you commit another crime, you're going to be executed or whatever. So there's all these like systems going on, and I think and that's sort of stuff that has been hinted at before, but this game goes even further in that if you steal something and you aren't caught, it still raises the like wariness and trustingness of like the people in that area that you stole from.
Yeah,
like they know a thief is out there and they're like more alert and less trustworthy.
So it's really striving for like a level of like realism and detail that like other games like Skyrim don't even try 100%. And go for.
Yes, this is a game that is deep systems in the way that the world interacts with each other and the way that what the world is expecting of you. If you want to convince somebody that like your speech attribute that you have to talk, like in like a Fallout game or whatever, you typically just have like the speech attribute. This goes further. Like it goes both into what you're wearing, like there's different clothing that you put on if you're going to be going,
because all that matters,
right? The clothing matters, and like your cleanliness matters. You have to make, if you want to wash up in the trough just to make sure you're not bloody or dirty, that's one thing. But if you also want to get that extra go over the top. You go to the bathhouse and you get extra clean, and you get a buff for that. And these are different ways that you can prepare for scenarios that you're heading into. So it really goes for like that deep immersion into this world, and really lets you role play in a way that is typically just not available in first person role playing, single player role playing games like this.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. And it definitely, like, I wish the setting appealed more to me, because I feel like that's what's holding it back in my mind. But I mean, I love
the setting. Yeah. The setting is one of my, it had no impact on my, like, my appeal of this game either. Like I've actually grown to like it as I've played more in it, but it didn't do anything for me either. I didn't know anything about this part of the world. I mean, and it's still like largely undeveloped. Like there's little towns, there's one big town, but you're also just going through a ton of grasslands and farmlands and forests. And it's very realistic in the way that, like, there's not something unique around every corner. It goes for the realism in the world versus like the giving you something cool but unrealistic. And it takes, like I was struggling with this game early on, and then I had like one day where I sat down for maybe 5 or 6 hours, and I really just like grappled with it. I'm like, okay, I've got to, I have no money. I'm starving constantly. Like I've got to just like figure out a way to like push through this and get my character on the right path here. And once I broke through that little barrier, I was hooked. Like that was all I needed. And like I was invested. The story is good. The side quests are great. It's just it all comes together in a really nice immersive package that, again, it's just not something that you really can find anywhere else.
Yeah, no, I love the commitment to the gamification of as much of the experience of being a squire in medieval Bohemia. So yeah, no, that it sounds awesome, and I will try it one of these days. But like I definitely go back and forth between being like, oh, that sounds interesting, and oh my gosh, why would you want to play this? So
yeah, I mean there are certain elements of it that I don't love. Like I think the save system, where the save system is essentially either you have a potion that you use to save your game anywhere, or it saves when you exit out to the menu, or like at certain plot moments. I think weird, the save system, it's like that. I don't think that doesn't add anything to the experience, right? Like I think you should have just. They're trying to avoid people save scumming when you really can just save scum by exiting to the menu. It just takes a little bit longer, basically.
That was going to be one of the things I brought up, was like, this seems like a save scum kind of game. So the fact that they actively try to combat it, like, makes me want to play it less, because it's like, okay, like that's how I would play this game, where it's like, okay, I want to see the different ways the world will react to sort of things. But
and there's probably PC mods that undo that, I would guess. I haven't looked, but I think that's just like kind of one thing they should have. Like they still left in other really gamey things. Like you still have your stash that appears at, like whenever you rent an inn or something, that like magically teleports for wherever your stash is. They didn't commit to the bit enough to remove that completely, Yeah. So, and they could have easily, like they could easily have avoided not having the stash and gone a bit more hardcore and just like made you, shuttle everything around with you on your horse, which you can do. But it's a bit of an inconsistency there in where they drew the line, and I wish that the save system wasn't one of those places they chose to draw it. But I mean, it's ultimately a pretty small complaint in a game that I think is just a really, really impressive package overall.
That is Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, y'all. It is Matthew's number 3 game of 2025, and my number 3 game of 2025, well, it's our boy Hideo Kojima. Death Stranding 2 on the beach.
I have this as my number 2. So yeah, let's go ahead and talk about it.
Man, this is like
we're in lockstep here. We're in lockstep.
Yeah. This is great. We could not have planned this any better, even if we had given each other our top 10 lists ahead of time.
Yeah.
I mean, what's there, like what's there to say about this game, right? Like it's Kojima at his most untethered. in the best possible ways, right? Like I think the things that really sort of brought me back to this, the things that really I keep going back to with Death Stranding 2 is just that it is all of the good parts of Death Stranding 1 just ratcheted up in terms of like the gameplay, all of the different like the progression systems. I mean, all of the different ways that you can sort of traverse around the world. Like there's just more and more novel and unique and cool ways to do all of that stuff. I mean, I think the cast of characters here is better than Death Stranding 1, and that's not to say that the cast in Death Stranding 1 was bad. I think this cast is just that much better. I mean, yeah, like there's really, I think the only sort of complaint that I had, and I think it's one that, I believe that you shared as well, Matthew, is that like Higgs coming back as the villain kind of felt like a not as impactful as I think they wanted it to be. Yeah. I think ultimately, like, he doesn't have as much impact on the story. He's just kind of there to cause trouble and be a nuisance. And like, I think it kind of wears thin by the back half. Of course, knowing Kojima, like, in true Kojima fashion, he redeems it with just the most incredible, set piece sequence to sort of close it out. So I think if you liked the first one and you like, if you're a Kojima fan, like there's nothing I can say that like wouldn't get you to try this game, but like it's in my mind, I think it's one of his best games for sure.
I fully agree. I think this is pretty definitively my favorite Kojima game, by some margin, I would say. Mm-hmm. I think for me, it really comes back to just how good the core gameplay loop is here, and how perfectly it is refined from the first game. This is as close to like what I would consider my ideal third person gameplay mechanics, where it is just as much about you versus the environment, or like, non-human enemies. You're not, it's not about combat against other people as much as it is combat against the landscape that you're traversing across, and you are using the tools at your disposal to conquer that. I love that. I think it's a really underutilized sort of theme in video games overall.
Yeah.
I just the loop between finding packages on the ground in between the shelters that you're going between anyway, and determining, I can pick this up, I can make a little detour, even and just kind of and moving from one
being
place
able to
the next
string together multiple deliveries too, and like just making these really long elaborate delivery routes too. Like I loved doing that, and I mean, like you said, like stopping and making little diversions here and there, picking up things, I mean, and just and that just as much is part of the core gameplay loop, the planning aspect, and like crafting equipment, and just just everything. Like there's just so much more here, so there's just so much more options available. So I can't say enough good things about it from a gameplay perspective. And I mean, I agree with you on the player versus the environment thing, because it does so in a way that doesn't feel like gimmicky or what's the like ragdoll physics, you know what I mean? Like it's not going for the baby steps thing, but it still feels challenging in a way that you have to account for at all times.
Exactly.
And I mean it's I agree. I mean, and it's, I mean, even like I would say, like, I don't know, I have to think about it in terms of like where I would put it in terms of the other Hideo Kojima games, but I will say it's his most thoughtful narrative. I mean, just like the themes of, like rebuilding and, finding community, and, I think that's sort of a theme in the games that are on my top 10 list, is that a lot of them are about finding a community in, really unfavorable scenarios, and just overcoming those odds with together. And I think Death Stranding 2 sort of embodies that the best out of all of the games that we've talked about so far.
For sure. I mean, the comparison to Citizen Sleeper 2, while on the surface these games don't seem like they have anything in common, in reality, they are both about, workers and labor and, finding your crew and people you can depend on when the world is ending, basically.
Yeah.
I think the other element of this Death Stranding is, we maybe take it for granted a little bit since this is the sequel, but this is a pretty unique sci-fi world. There's a lot of sci-fi games that come out. They're sort of reflections of other sci-fi universes that you already know. This feels, with the implementation of the tar and the beach things and the way that death is kind of broken for some people, it's very unique. It gets, it can be hard to follow, but I think that speaks to the uniqueness. And I think that this game does a better job of, using the foundation that was established in the first game as a launch
and just going wild with it. Yeah.
To go wild, a leash off, and because you know the principles of it, and they can just go in whatever direction they want. I will say, I think if we're going to talk about negatives for this game, the two things, one which you already mentioned, is Higgs. I think with a better villain, a better primary villain, would have really sent this over the top for me. I think with a better villain, ultimately, this is my game of the year.
I agree.
I think Higgs's inclusion was a big stain on, just when thinking back about the game. That's one thing that really kind of stands out as a negative to me. Mm-hmm. And the other one, again, is the ending. I'm not going to spoil it here.
Yeah.
But and I think you were a little bit more positive on the actual outcomes of the ending than I was. But I will suffice to say, I felt that some of the events that transpire at the end of that game undo some of the emotional work that goes into the middle parts of that game. And it kind of cheapens it a little bit in a way that I was not really a fan of.
I can see that as well. And I mean, I think that's one thing, is that like there were few perfect narrative experiences this year. And I mean, I think, Death Stranding, I think you nailed it, where had this just had the story to sort of back up the gameplay, like I think this is my game of the year 9 years out of 10,
Yeah, same here.
Well, moving on to my number 2, because we just talked about your number 2.
Yes. Runner up.
We're going to go with the French one, Clair Obscur Expedition 33.
Nice.
I mean, listen, man, this game, it deserves all of the awards that it's getting. I mean, when I look back at 2025 and I think of, just like the year of gaming as a whole, this stands out because it's similarly to Death Stranding, it's just so unique. It's so original. It's so creative. I mean, and it's backed up by what I would say is like, it's once in a generation levels of presentation. There's just like, they know what they're like, there's a confidence. I know we talked about this in our like, preview / spoiler cast, where there's just a confidence right out the gate that, what they have narratively is good. They're unafraid to continually up the ante. And not only that, but like, not only do they continually up the ante in terms of like the narrative stakes, but like they're always pulling it off, in my opinion. Like they always pay off in ways that feel rewarding. And it's powered by, in my opinion, what's one of the best casts in a video game in modern memory. For me, it harkens back to Final Fantasy X and that like sort of ragtag group of characters, the whole, being like the sort of last stand, this last bastion for humanity sort of thing. Facing incredible odds. So I could go on about this game, right? Like it is, the combat is, I think it's best case scenario for like what a modern turn-based game could be, where it's active, it's engaging, it demands you to pay attention to it. But there are ways around it that don't feel as demanding as something like a Dark Souls. So I mean, while I didn't pour an obsessive or an insane amount of time into it as some other people, I totally understand and get why it is getting the level of praise that it has.
This is, I mean, this one is one that I did not have on my top 10. actually, and I was pretty surprised about that too. I felt like that it probably should have been there, but when I really started thinking about it and thinking about how much I enjoyed these other games and this, it ended up missing. Yeah, but I agree with the thing is, while it missed my list, I still agree with basically everything you said. I think where the disconnect comes from is that I did not really develop like an emotional resonance with what was going on here, and I also didn't like the turn-based combat as much as some people did. And I have to come back to it. I did not like the final act of this game. I didn't like the way that they handled the endings. But again, everything else you said is true. Like the art style, the uniqueness of the world and the setting, things that we just talked about, like for Death Stranding, all apply here as well. I mean, this is like a really unique and interesting world that I want to see more stuff in. Like I want to see, maybe not necessarily like a direct sequel, but more things set in this world with these kind of magic and factions and everything. Like I absolutely want to see that happen. And I agree. I think it rightfully got ton of awards here at the end of the year. It resonated with a lot of people, and I'm glad to see a game like this get the credit that it deserves.
Yeah, no, and ultimately for me, the thing that sort of held it back from being that like true sort of like comprehensive like game of the year experience is that there are just some quality of life things, like the exploration is just straight up bad. Like it's very PS2 era open world, navigating, and it's I think in otherwise, like in a game that does so much else right, like it really sticks out. But it's obviously it's a debut title for the team, and so like I'm not, I can't say enough kind things about it as a result. Really excited to see what the team at Sandfall Interactive do after they've sort of finished their victory lap. Congrats to them, because they deserve all the love for this game.
For sure.
All right, Matthew, it's time.
Okay.
Game of the year 2025. Talk to me.
This is one I promise you that you didn't see coming, because we have not talked about this game at all on the podcast or separately. My game of the year 2025 is Double Fine's Keeper.
Oh, I love the pick.
Yes.
All right, talk me through why Double Fine's Keeper is your game of the year.
So I want to preface this by saying that if you are interested in playing this game, or even if you're only lightly interested in playing this game, I would just go play it without looking into it further. Because they intentionally did not show significant portions of this game in the pre-release marketing, which I think probably hurt the number of people who played this game at launch, but greatly enhanced the experience for those who did. And that's that. I really don't want to say anything more about what I'm not saying there than that. But I will say that a large part of why I liked this game so much was because of the ways that it, because of the ways the gameplay evolved over the course of the runtime. So, that's all I'm going to say about that. But what I will say is that I think this is a very me game. I am a noted like walking simulator lover. This is not exactly a walking simulator, but the early hours of this game are, mostly just walking. You're not doing a whole lot of anything else other than taking in scenery of the world that that surrounds you, and learning about what's happened and how you got here, what you are, what everything else is. I mean, I think this is, we talked about Death Stranding being a unique world. This is maybe not as unique a world, but I think this is this is the first Double Fine has a noted history of like kind of psychedelic universes, where they're putting a unique, they're creating worlds. They are creating unique worlds.
Yeah.
They are not trying to emulate anything else. And I think their world.
I mean, and this is literally, we've sort of buried the lead here quite a bit. Keeper, this is, for those of you who don't know, Keeper is a game where, at least on the outset, you're playing as a walking light tower.
Yes, you play as a lighthouse. You are like the lighthouse keeper is where the name comes from.
Got it.
Yeah. So I mean, and that psychedelic and like kind of I guess psychedelic is really the only word I know to describe it. It's not exactly what like not 70s psychedelic, but there are elements uniquely of like colorful, and sort of like have unique stylistic flourishes that you would like that are exaggerated and not lifelike, I would say. And that hasn't always worked for me. Like I've always appreciated like Psychonauts on a level of more like an academic appreciation versus one that I've actually like loved to play myself.
Yeah.
And this is Lee Petty. He was the one who he's like, they have a couple teams at Double Fine now, and he did Headlander. I don't know if you're familiar with Headlander.
That sounds familiar.
It was like a 2D side-scrolling game where you're basically controlling a head that you can land on different bodies and like to solve puzzles and move and stuff. So that kind of gives you an idea of sort of like wacky off the wall stuff that he's working with here. This is, it's a shorter game. It's maybe about 5 hours long. You could probably finish it in less time than that. This was a year where I really thought a lot about how long games, like what's the perfect runtime for a game. Obviously that's not a universal answer, but I found myself appreciating games that knew how long they should be, whether that's 20 hours, 30 hours, or in this case, 5 hours. Right. There's like no filler here. I think about like the original God of War game, which was like 6 hours long, and everything you did in that game was new, and you only did it like once, basically. This is a game like that, and I really appreciated that. And I mean, the bottom line is that my catnip, so to speak, is really like my holy trinity of game design is a combination of like beautiful and memorable scenery and world design, with environmental storytelling and like, thematically interesting puzzles, not like stumpers, but just like things to keep you engaged in the environment and things going on. Like those are three of my favorite things in games. And I mean, this game nails all of those.
That's awesome. And yeah, I mean, it's one that I've sort of penciled. And yeah, I think this is going to motivate me to give it a try, because I am a Double Fine appreciator, kind of like you are, but like, more in the academic sense. But this game does have a look to it that is appealing to me. Like, I think the art style seems really cool and unique, and it seems like the gameplay does go places. So I'm interested to check it out and just see what Tim cooked up over there.
It does go places, and yeah, like the world. I mean, there's like I said, environmental storytelling. Like this is our world essentially, but it is post-humans, and there's a lot of changes that have happened in the world. Life forms have evolved, plants have evolved, and the kind of flora and fauna that you're encountering throughout this game are, unique and new and just always interesting and reflecting about, how the story of the world and how you got to this point. It was one where I was always, I looked around every corner. I didn't miss anything, and it just pulled me in, and as the best games do. And I loved it. It's my game of the year.
Congrats to Tim Schafer and the fine folks over at Double Fine. Yeah, no, I mean that's a surprise, but it is one that I think it's an exciting surprise, and it's one that I definitely it's going to make me want to go check that game out. Matthew, it's time for my game of the year, and mine is not going to be nearly as big of a surprise as yours was.
I have a feeling
it's Hades.
This is going. Yes,
it's Hades 2. I mean, man, what can I say about this game that I haven't already said? It's the perfect roguelike. It is gameplay. It is gameplay perfection. I think just the amount of different weapons and skills, and then the different sort of sub permutations that you can unlock beyond that, and then on top of that you have the boon system. I think it's infinitely replayable, and then what they do, that sort of like the master stroke, if you will, is they give you a story and characters that are worth revisiting. Like, it is worth like dying in these runs to come back, in between, and have these conversations and catch up and learn more about who Dora is. And, like, I swear I can fix Eris, like there's all these different characters and relationships that you build, with these characters. And like, I mean, a lot of it, when you kind of zoom out and look at it through the lens of Greek mythology, like essentially this is just a story of a big dysfunctional family, right? And like, you're trying to navigate that as one of the grandchildren, trying to navigate like this, like, centuries long beef between your grandpa and your dad. And it's obviously, it's very fantastical, but like, it's a very human story. And I think, ultimately, like, the way that the story ends up is one that, like, I can't say enough good things about like Greg Kasavin and like the team of writers over there at Supergiant, because like they are continually like finding just really cool and unique ways to like make their like supernatural worlds feel like human.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. I mean, would you say I this is a game that I have not played myself, but I've watched my wife play quite a bit of this, and I'm familiar with the cast and the sort of the boons and everything, and it certainly I see everything that you're talking about here. I think the cast is an interesting one, because I think it's part of the difficulty that I've had is moving from the Hades 1 cast to the Hades 2 cast.
Yeah.
Like I got very invested in the first Hades cast, and it's like, you move to the second one, and it's like, oh, well, this is all feels very different. So I mean,
yeah.
Do you think that this cast, like, overall is better? Like what would you, how would you? When we had this conversation earlier on the podcast where we discussed this, I pretty much knew at that point that this was going to be your game of the year, because you had literally nothing negative to say about it at that time. So I'm assuming you think that the cast levels up and goes places that it didn't in the first game.
I mean, I think the one thing that sort of stands out to me, so like, I didn't really interact too much with the cast in Hades 1, and I think a lot of that came down to just the ambrosia and like the items that you would use, right, sort of being harder to obtain in 1. I think one of the things that Hades 2 does across the board is it just sort of makes everything a little bit more accessible, just like across the board. So there's never a moment where I felt like, oh man, I'm grinding for this one item so I can progress, like unlock this one thing to then progress the story. So I mean, I think just by making it simpler in that regard, it allowed me to get attached to those characters in a way that I just didn't attach to 1. So it's more of like a gameplay mechanical thing. I wouldn't say like one is better than the other. I mean, I think the dialogue and the writing like is all just, it's so clever, it's so smart. I made the reference that, I mean, I think, for me, like, there is a personal connection to this game because, I made the reference previously that we as a family went through an Epic the Musical obsession. And just to see a lot of those elements come back just in a different format, in a different form. I'm still upset that we did not get a Scylla and the Sirens performance at the Game Awards, because like, honestly, and like, once again, like, all due respect to Clair Obscur, it deserves every single award it has won, but Hades 2 is my personal favorite, like, music soundtrack of the year. Darren Korb always puts out bangers, but like, I mean, this is essentially just a prog rock album, but with like, like the the orchestral themes that play like when you're on Mount Olympus are just like, there's a sense of scale also to it that I just haven't felt in a game since like the original God of War, where it's just everything feels so big and gigantic, and the fact that they're able to do this on an isometric, using an isometric camera is really impressive. Like some of the later boss fights are just like really, 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 really good. So yeah, no, it's I mean, the cast is, I wouldn't say that they're improved, but I would say like the gameplay enhancements overall allowed me to engage with them in a way that I hadn't previously.
Yeah, one thing I want to call it is the art here is like fantastic.
Oh, God.
It was fantastic in Hades. It's always great, but it's still like we take it for granted. But it's like all of the character art, the environmental art here, everything is top notch. The other thing that I wanted to say, and then this is, we don't have to get super into spoilers here, but at the end of, in Hades 1 as well, when you have completed a run, there's incentive to continue completing runs. Like, you have to complete it a certain number of times to get the true ending. I think, without saying too much, the way that they implement this here with in Hades 2, I don't know how I can describe it without actually saying what happens here, but it involves, Kronos is the big bad here. The way that it involves Kronos, I think, is extremely clever. The way that they were able to keep the same mechanic from the first game, but in a way that actually feels like it ties in much better than it did in the first game. I was very impressed to see that.
Yeah. Everything has purpose, like everything, like there wasn't a system or anything that like I interacted with that I felt like, oh man, like they could have taken this out, and it like everything feels like it's additive in its own way. So yeah, like there's it's a game that I have poured 70 hours into, and it's, one that I still go back to and just to play something that feels like really, really good, really, really tight. It's kind of ruined, other roguelikes for me. Like honestly, playing Ball Pit like has been nice and fun, but it's like, man, like the progression systems in Hades 2 are like unlike anything I've seen in another roguelike. So I think it deserves calling out here.
For sure. Yeah, that's a great game of the year.
Game of the year, y'all. That's it. We've counted down our top 10 games of the year. We hope you guys enjoyed them. If you love them, let us know in the comments. Let us know which ones you liked. Let us know which ones you didn't like. And you can fight us. That's fine. We'll fight you. But yeah, I mean, overall, Matthew, how are you feeling, about our lists, and then really just like the year as a whole?
Yeah, I think our lists were really reflective of basically how the year went, and we had a good mix of smaller games and the big ones on there. I don't think I'm trying to think of games that like maybe would have been considered snubs off of both of our list. I think like my first cut was essentially Silent Hill F, which
I didn't notice that Silent Hill didn't make the cut.
Yeah, I think maybe if I'd had time to finish playing it and get the true ending, that might have colored it, and been enough to push it onto the list. But I mean, I think every major game that came out this year was pretty represented.
I was looking through my list too, and it's like, the variety of not only just the like the size and the scope of some of these games, but just like the means in which that I played them. Like obviously Hades 2, early access Steam game, but then Clair Obscur I played through Game Pass, and Citizen Sleeper 2 I also played through Game Pass, but then Ghost of Yōtei is a $70 PlayStation exclusive. So it really speaks to, I think, the variety that we're seeing with publishing in the gaming industry right now. I think a lot of noise is being made about Clair Obscur sort of sweeping and that being a lower budget game. I do see some sort of positive trends on the horizon. With some of these games not quite with the games being game of the year contenders not necessarily being the most big budget ones. I think that was a good trend to see this year, as a lot of the smaller games get a lot of love. Yeah,
I mean, we may not be getting as much innovation from the AAA space, but I think that, the games like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, Death Stranding 2, and even like something like Donkey Kong Bonanza, like there are still new things being done in these spaces by, with by companies with big budgets. And then you go on the lower end, like you have at the mid tier, obviously Clair Obscur. We have talked about that endlessly, but it bears repeating that, you know, that's a pretty moderately sized budget for a game, and you know they were able to deliver something that was considered by many to be like the best experience of the year. And then coupled with the and on the indie side, of course, is always going to be the hotbed of innovation, and we had a lot of good ones of those as well this year.
Yeah, no, I mean, looking at the my top three games of the year again, like all together, the one thing that I could describe, like the one adjective I could use to describe them, is that they all have a strong vision. You know what I mean? Like whatever it is, like there's a strong vision, and they went out and they executed on it. Where like Death Stranding 2 that vision is weird. You know, like it is a weird game. Like those, you know, like it's a game that's definitely not going to appeal to everybody. And same with Clair Obscur, right? Like it's a weird French game. It's a turn-based RPG. But like they all know what they're going for, and they're not afraid to, you know, like they don't want to water it down to sort of appeal to the mainstream.
Right. Yeah, I think it goes. Yeah, exactly. Is that you don't want to make a game that is for everybody. You shouldn't try to make a game that's for everybody. Maybe it ends up resonating with the majority of people the way Clair Obscur did, but you should be like the creators should have their vision and what they want to deliver on, and they shouldn't have to compromise on that in order to try to appeal to more, you know, the greater masses. Yep. Even something like, I mean, even looking at like Arc Raiders, you know, like that is a game that I don't think really tried to appeal to the masses. You know, it is an extraction shooter. There is frustration to be had in that game, but it doubled down on it, and you know, people really loved it for that.
Yep, absolutely. So note to all the game devs, I know you guys are listening to this with bated breath. Keep making big swings and making weird shit, because we will play it and we will love it. That's going to do it for our top 10 games of 2025 extravaganza. We appreciate you hanging out with us for this long. You can, if you don't already, subscribe to us on your podcast of choice. You can also follow us, find all of our social platforms at timekillerspod.com. So yeah, give us a follow, give us a like, leave us a review if you're so inclined. Matthew, anything you want to say to these people before we let them go?
Hope you all had a good end of your year, and we will see you in 2026.
Happy New Year, y'all. We will see you in 2026. Here's to even more great games to review in the coming year.